Hello, this is Ross Bliley from the podcast Pigskin Tales. This podcast is sponsored by Sterling Soap Company. With products sold throughout 41 locations around the globe, Sterling Soap Company has a unique assortment of products to choose from for your loved one for the holidays. Handmade artisan soaps created by Roderick and Amanda Lovin since 2012, these products are affordable and provide great value. Act now and save on your shipping costs. If you purchase $75 or more, your shipping cost is free in the United States. Shop now online at sterlingsoap.com.
Hey there, sports history fan. This is Darren Hayes, host of the Pigskin Dispatch and Jersey Dispatch podcast. I hope you've enjoyed another great episode here on Sports History Network. Now, speaking of sports history, this episode was brought to you by Firefly Books, and they have two great ones for you this summer. For basketball fans, they have the NBA 75, the definitive history by author Dave Zarum, who's appeared on our Jersey Dispatch podcast recently. He tells about the experience, the thrilling journey of the NBA, from its humble beginnings to its modern glory. Uncover the untold stories of triumph, controversy, and the greatest stars of the game. This isn't just a book. It's courtside seats to over 75 years of NBA history. And for the golf enthusiasts, swing into The Golf Round I'll Never Forget by Matt Adams. Relive 50 of golf's most memorable moments through the eyes of the legends themselves. From Garcia's triumph at the 2017 Masters to Nicklaus' miraculous 1986 comeback, it's the closest you'll get to walking the fairways with golf's greatest. Get your summer read on. Grab a copy of NBA 75 or The Golf Round I'll Never Forget, available online or at your favorite bookstore.
And we'd like to welcome everybody back to the Football's Family Podcast. It is a very, very hot day in Tennessee, but we're going to stay cool, listen to a podcast today. And I got a special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Dr. Charles Ripp. I'm a physician in Colorado Springs. I practice family practice, anesthesiology, and interventional pain management. And the reason that the show asked me to present myself was because I've published two recent sports books in the last couple of years. One is Glass Backboards, which is essentially the first compendium of basketball.
Oh, wow. Wow. I like that picture. It's a frozen backboard. I guess that's where you are, being as cold as it can be.
I grew up in Wisconsin, so that's kind of typical.
Don't shoot too hard or you'll shatter it.
Yeah. And then the day before the draft this year, I published the first compendium of football. It's 50 chapters. It's called Inside the Pylon, an American Football Anthology. And that was well received at the draft. I talked to a lot of people and talked to them about the books. And so that's what I'm going to talk about today.
Well, please. So you said you grew up in Wisconsin. Are you a Packers fan? Or since you moved down to Denver, are you a Broncos fan?
I'm a diehard Packers fan. So when I was before kindergarten, I was taken to a small gym where there was about seating for about 500, and there was probably 5,000 people there. And there was this short, chubby guy there with about 8 players, an 8mm video film. And he talked about blocking and tackling. And we sat in the front row with my brother and my dad. And after the presentation, I was the first one in line. He looked down at me and said, "What's life all about, son?" And I said, "Winning." He reached in his pocket and gave me his rosary. And that was Vince Lombardi.
Oh, wow. Do you still have it?
I had it for years. I gave it to a friend of mine when I was playing basketball at Creighton that had a bunch of bad luck going to him. And so I said, "You need this." So he's got it. Things are better for him now. And he called me like a couple of years ago, said, "What do I do with the rosary?" And I said, "You know what? Give it to somebody that needs it."
That's good. Yeah, pass it on.
Yeah.
Play it forward.
So
See, so you got to meet Vince Lombardi. I've heard stories about his video or his football, the one-on-one football study that he would run that sweep play over and over and over again, studying it over and over and over again till they just knew it in their sleep. And that's just a perfect example of that.
I remember him saying this at the lecture. Uh, he didn't care if he had 6 plays on offense. He didn't care if the other team knew what was coming. He thought they should still be successful. And so that was really kind of the first famous sweep. Um, the thing about Vince is that a lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of people helped make the NFL, but he really made the NFL in that area. The whole state of Wisconsin was pulled in. He went to all these small towns and gave lectures. He was interpersonal. He brought players with him. And, there's still, the whole state is following the Packers. There's no car on the streets when they play. In fact, for years, there were these small town get-togethers. My mother had one for years, and all the neighbors would come over and they'd bring food and they'd watch the Packer game. So
That's amazing because Wisconsin, Green Bay in particular, is the smallest media market in the NFL, isn't it?
Green Bay is about 110,000 people.
So yeah.
And I mean, but I don't know what size media market. It's probably, one of the smallest, but they're kind of America's team too. A lot of people follow them from all over the country.
So when you were up there, and I know this is doing with your book, but I still think this is fascinating to me. When you're up there, do you go up there any during the football season?
Oh yeah, I go to a game every year, and
So you said that there's nobody on the street. How green is that area? I mean, just Packer green. Is it everywhere?
yes, yeah, yeah. People are very knowledgeable about football. When I was at the draft in April, I mean, I was showing my books. I hit about 20 block parties walking in there. These are all small neighborhood parties that have food and they celebrate it, even if they don't go into the game. They haven't sold a ticket there since 1959. So it's that long lasting.
So you're basically with parents handing it down to children, to their children, just
Right. And they probably, if you're on the list, it's like thousands, to get a Green Bay ticket. I mean, you can still get them secondary market.
that's amazing. Where I am right here, Doc, you can get a ticket because when the Titans stink, people just give up on it. But that's not the case in Green Bay, is it?
Oh, no, no. They've had a lot of great players there, a lot of great coaches, et cetera. Probably the most interesting thing about the Packers, once Lombardi got the ball rolling there in the early 60s, was just at my house. We invited kids over to watch the game, popcorn. But the biggest Packer fan was my dad. He was a Flying Tiger in World War II. And when they weren't playing, we were in the car traveling a few hundred miles to fellow guys in his battalion that he ran. And he'd drive 300-400 miles just to have a beer with his comrades. And they did that until they died. But, and now I understand why they did that. That was their therapy for most of those guys that were in Southeast Asia. But football has become part of our culture, in part because of Lombardi and the Packers. His interpersonal reactions with fans was tremendous. He was highly respected. And so my dad was an incredible football personality. He was a smart guy. He was a good athlete. He reportedly shot a 27 on 9 holes of golf at the local country club. Old average 227. I mean, and played back in those days, there were small towns that played fastball, hardball, baseball, and he was an excellent player. But the key thing with Packer football was my dad never sat down, and our friends were over. It was called a twofer. You got to watch the game, and you got to watch Dad. Dad would pace up and down He would call the plays. He would call the penalties before the flag went up. And my mother would be over in the other room crying, and he'd scream at the TV, he'd scream at the refs, he'd scream at the announcers, and my friends just loved it. I mean, it's his excitement just carried over. I mean, he'd already have the play called before the ref even set the ball down. So anyway, and at halftime we go out, and my dad would toss us footballs. And once the 15 minutes were up, we were back in there watching the Packer game. The things that drove him nuts historically were Kezar Stadium with John Brody. It was always dark. And the game was late because it was West Coast, and they lost. Same thing with Fran Tarkington. And he said, I don't know why that guy doesn't move to Canada. He drives us nuts. And they were always the poor teams that beat Green Bay. San Francisco and Minnesota Vikings. They had something for Green Bay. They lost a lot of close games to those teams.
That might have been a sight too for, I'll tell you what. See, Doc, this is what this show is all about, what you're telling me. I love the stories. And the fact that you were telling it with such a twinkle in your eye tells me that those aren't too far from you.
Oh, yeah. I took a little bit of my dad home. My kids can't stand it when I'm watching the Packers or any other game. I've called the play before it walks up there. I've already called off the penalty. And
Do you have to have Sunday ticket, or are you able to get it where you are live?
oh, yeah, we have that. We got it through our cable, so it works pretty well.
We had to do that when I was in Alabama to get the Titans games, and I realized why am I paying to watch them lose? It's just sad.
Yeah,
Although I think you got a quarterback now with Love that seems to be a legit dude.
yeah. I hope he does well. Last year, I think he was bothered by a medial collateral ligament tear, and he played through that. He probably wasn't as effective. This year, I mean, they'll be very competitive. That whole division will be very competitive.
Oh,
So,
goodly. When you end up with the best record in the NFL or in the NFC and you're ranked, what is it, like the fifth in the seeding, that tells you something with Minnesota.
oh yes, yeah.
That tells you something. Of course, I think you might want to tell me some rule changes. I heard, but I haven't really finalized this. Did they change that seating arrangements, or is that coming next year?
That um, I'm not 100% certain. I think it was discussed, tabled, and re-brought up again. It may have passed, and I wasn't aware of it, but there's a lot of discussion
Well, I
about
get
that.
having, the four division winners being 1, 2, 3, 4. I get that. But if you're what was the Vikings were like 14-3,
Yeah, it was something like that. It was quite good.
and they shouldn't have been the fifth team in the NFC. I'm sorry, they shouldn't have been. But
Right.
that being said, tell me some rules coming up in your book. You were talking about rules. Can you kind of give us what you're referring to and what maybe a history of rules that kind of changed the game or where you are right now with your study of it?
Well, it's interesting. I had a patient this morning that was a ref, high school ref, and I went through these rule changes with him, and he agreed 100% with them. And it's hard to change rules, but I think the field of play with the speed out there should be Canadian, 110 by 65 yards, enlarge it a little bit. And that includes a Canadian end zone, 20 yards, so you can run plays.
Now, let me ask you this. I like that idea because what is 100 yards now and 53
Right.
yards long or wide? Is that correct?
Yes.
I like that idea of having it bigger because you got some fast guys, even on defense. The defensive linemen are running 5 or 5 40s, which is insane for how big they are. But how would you adjust? You get 10 extra yards, that could break records over time. Would you have an asterisk next to it, or would you just say this is just how NFL is?
I would put an asterisk next to it. The only asterisks I put in my football book, I put a half asterisk on New England for, Spygate.
Little cheating there.
Yeah, yeah. And Deflategate and a few other things, filming other teams. If it's one or two things, but there was quite a few things when I researched this that didn't make sense. I know some people say you have to be on the brink of illegality to win. I'm not so certain about that, but there was a lot of stuff that went on.
I was, and I don't know, being a historian, you probably know this too. The Michigan Ohio State rivalry back in the 70s with Bo and oh my goodness, my mind went blank. I could see as Bo Schembechler and Woody have them film each other and all these things. That's just some espionage stuff. In fact, I interviewed a guy who wrote a book called Spies in the Sidelines that kind of documents stuff that you're talking about. I think the Patriots won a couple Super Bowls because of stuff like that. I get the asterisks.
Well, spying has gone back for many, many, many years, and probably the most famous spying was in the 1951 chase for the National League title, where the Brooklyn Dodgers had somebody seated in center fields with binoculars that were stealing catcher signals. And it's an old, ploy that works. And that was relayed into the batter.
Well, that's kind of like the Astros a few years ago with the trash can lids.
Right.
I get it, but at the same time, you're like, just let the game play. If you're better than the other team, that's what it takes.
Right.
So what else? What other rules would you suggest? Because I like that
Okay.
idea. The thing is, can you widen the NFL stadiums the way they are? What type of renovations would that take?
I think that as they build new stadiums, they make it account for that.
Okay,
And
yeah.
let's phase it in. That's one option. Football fields in the early days, going back to the 1869 game between Princeton and Rutgers, had all different sizes and different numbers of players. And there was a lot of variations between conferences and this type of thing. But the next thing I got down here, time between plays, 25 seconds. And no screwing around. Once that ball is down, it's 25-second clock. And get up there, run the play. Fans want to see, they don't want to see people running clock. They want to see, if there's 2, 3, 4 minutes left, they want to see the game moving and the team behind has a chance to get back into it, not just running out clocks. So that was a big thing with the ref that I talked to him about this morning.
Kind of like the pitch clock in the majors right now.
Yes. Move the game along. Another thing through all of football, Pop Warner, high school, college, pro, and the debate, 1 foot in after a pass catch. And just let it go at that. I'm not a big fan of replay because on a lot of replays you can't tell anyway, both basketball and football. So my feeling is that you live with what the ref says, and that's the way the game is, and you keep the game moving. So I was pretty much for total instant replay removal. I like the Canadian rule, forward man in motion on offense. I think it gives a lot more variations to offense. The biggest rule change is the old rule, bring back the ground causing fumbles. Part of a tackle is not just carrying the ball and maintaining possession. It's 1 count after you hit the ground. When I was playing football, you had to last the ground, and it was generally a count. I mean, if you were down, the whistle blew, done. And this replay, how many thousands of replays have you seen, whether the ball squirts out before the knee or elbow hits, and it becomes a split second, a millisecond type thing? I'm saying the ground is part of the tackle. You got to survive that. A lot of people like that rule change because fumbles are interesting because they change the complexion of the game. How many fumbles have you seen where it was overruled and the refs don't even know or anything like that? But if he hits the ground and that ball pops, it makes football a lot more fun. Last team that touches the ball on a fumble has possession. It's a Canadian rule. So all these fumbles that are bobbling around and go out of bounds, the short field, American field, you get a free pass by fumbling the ball if it fumbles out of bounds. But if the defense touches it, like in Canada, it's their ball. Fumbling the ball through the end zone and you lose, let's say you did a 90-yard drive. This has been controversial for years. But if you do a 90-yard drive and the guy fumbles the ball through the end zone, it's a touchback. I say you lose it down, you put it on the 10-yard line, you keep going. If it's fourth down, it is a touchback.
See, I've never understood that. Even if a guy is about 1 yard short and is diving, if it fumbles, goes out the end zone, it's a touchback for the other team. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Never has.
Another big rule change, movement on the line of scrimmage, offense or defense, encroachment. It slows games down. There are too many flags. It doesn't really give anybody an advantage. A split second movement. The other team generally reacts to it anyway. And my feeling is, especially on defense or offense, if you retreat back to the line of scrimmage, there's no penalty. An illegal shift, a minor thing like that, they need to get rid of those rules. I still believe in having 7 men on the line of scrimmage, 3 on defense, but there's so many tic-tac rules having to do with offsides and variations of that they need to get rid of that. A lot of people don't understand those rules. They change somewhat. Teams that have an advantage at home where the quarterback can't scream loud enough or they can't hear his clap, it becomes a disadvantage. I just think that we throw all that out. Timeouts. You get credit for a third timeout. You get 2 timeouts, no 2-minute warning. You get a third timeout if you have no personal foul. You earn that. So offensive delay of game penalties. That's not flagged until after the play is completed. If it's successful, you got to redo the play. If it's not successful, you just lose the down and you keep the game going. Halo rule, 5-yard buffer for receiving all punts, drop kicks, or tee kickoffs. My big thing is that this rule has come and gone. It's kind of a dangerous rule. Somebody catches the ball and then 1 millisecond afterward gets clocked. I think he's got to have room to catch the ball for both safety and possession.
You being a doctor, you said you were, what was your specialty again? I want to say it, but I might be off on that.
I practice family practice, anesthesiology, OR anesthesiology, and interventional pain.
So you would probably be familiar with some of the things, of course, with your football background too, of having basically being speared, being unaware of what's happening and being speared by a 200 or 300-pound man. You know, if you had an awareness like you're talking about, you probably could avoid that. But I can't imagine receiving a punt and starting to take off and then being speared by a 250-pound man going 90-0. I just can't imagine that.
Well, the physics behind it are tremendous. A lot of my book, there's a huge chapter in there on injuries and especially head injuries, which I've studied quite a bit. And basically CTE, the brain damage from this, it exists, repeated head trauma, whether it's football or another sport. The biggest sport is kids' playground equipment. It's not talked about much. Girls' soccer, hockey. There's a lot of sports that have head trauma. Football hit the because it's so popular. It's so much part of our culture, no different than race cars or hamburgers or iPhones. That's why it gets a lot of media attention, the head injuries. But basically, football, most authorities now recommend no tackle football until around age 12. And there really isn't any significant head injuries until you start getting into mid-high school. Then they start to see a little bit of head injuries from repeated concussions. And, it's called a second impact syndrome. And I was surprised last year, there was a guy that had a really significant concussion, not just just a brief loss of consciousness. And that's what concussion's described as, his head trauma with loss of consciousness. He had a serious concussion. Second impact causes a lot of brain edema, further cellular changes. I was surprised the docs let him play the next week. I get the playoffs and all that, but still, we're talking about they've already shown many times second impact is a lot worse. So these people need to be rested. But I understand the seriousness of the playoffs. There's a player, doctor's family, there's all that, and the team playing a role in that.
What do you
Overtime.
think? Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Overtime. Pop Warner, high school, college, pro, no more gimmicks. You put the ball at the 50-yard line, both teams get a chance, and you go from there. None of this 25-yard line and then 2-point whatever. You just play football. And so you got to sustain a drive, or you got to get a defensive stop and score. First one to score wins. Both teams get an offensive chance. I don't like the 25-yard. It's too I don't know, gimmicky. It's not really football. I think better plays, you'd have some long throws, that type of thing in there. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No,
You had a question.
You didn't interrupt me at all. This is your show. Now, my question for you is you said your dad was World War II vet in Southeast Asia. So he grew up, was he from Wisconsin as well?
Yes.
So he grew up with probably Curly Lambeau and that. Is that why he became a Packers fan?
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody. Yeah. He was a little sports guy. And so, I went back to those days.
So you learn from him, you learn from yourself and experiencing things. You pass that on to your kids as well. Are they Packers fans?
Packers and Broncos.
Okay, so you moved down to Denver when they were still kind of getting used to football, correct?
Right. We're in Colorado Springs.
Oh yeah, so there you go. There you go.
So,
And the reason I'm doing that, I'm setting up kind of this because the way I understand it, writing a book, even to the rule changes that you want, means that you've done a lot of history and a lot of study in these things. Can you give me one moment that you think really shaped the NFL to where it is today? And I'm not just talking about the greatest game ever played. I'm talking, in your opinion, what was one moment that make the NFL what it is today, or football, period?
Joe Namath.
Joe Namath.
Yep. People in Green Bay, they had won the first two Super Bowls. I believe it was 67, 68. Namath was 69. And they were saying how great that Baltimore team was. Earl Morrall, quarterback, he was a good player. And Unitas was hurt. But they had a lot of great players. They would say how dominant and great. And everybody in Wisconsin was upset about this because they had just gone through 5 NFL championships in the 60s. So when Namath came out and he was, gloating that they're going to win the game and all this type of thing. And I watched a lot of those, AFL games. And I always thought those teams were damn good. And when he came out and beat Baltimore, essentially Super Bowl III, back then they called it, the World Championship game. And the first one, it was a partially empty stadium. You could get in for $25 at the LA Coliseum. But Namath changed everything. There's a pantomime at in Canton at the NFL Hall of Fame where he talks about it, and everybody should see that even barely likes football. But I think he actually changed football. He moved this into the Super Bowl era. He was a great player. When I listed quarterbacks as far as talent, I put 3 Mahomes, 2 Namath, and 1 Rodgers. Brady was the most winning guy in the NFL. But I felt when I watched, I've seen probably as much football as anybody. And I thought Namath, he played on a Monday night once back in the Don Meredith days. And I saw him throw passes there, receivers double covered, and he just laid that ball in there. I said, nobody can throw a ball like that.
I never watched Namath play. He was gone before I was born, but I've watched enough NFL films where they talked about his release that you have to slow the camera down to actually see the ball release from his hands. I mean, he just had that quick of a release. I mean, just amazing. And they said the closest comparison for my time was Dan Marino, what he could do. So that tells you something.
Yeah. He was just a great player. He liked beer, girls, typical guy stuff. And he had a good time playing.
He changed things, and for what I understand, the NFL became flashy, and he really did kind of herald in the two becoming what they are today, AFL, NFL.
Yes, I agree. I mean, the league for years, struggled. College football through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, like with Oklahoma's 55-game winning streak, was king. And a lot of people were upset. You were chastised if you actually somewhat watched or cheered for an NFL team. College was it. A lot of college coaches and players, went back and they would be upset at the NFL for doing what they're doing. It's a college game.
Now it's a little different, just a tad. I've got a few more minutes, and I want to ask you a couple more questions, Doc, if I may. First off, where can we get your books?
The football books, ColoradoCoachDiary.com. That's my podcast. And that's about a Colorado coach. It's got a lot of football plays in there. And the highlight of that podcast is an offense that has 2 quarterbacks in the backfield. You'd enjoy it.
All right. Say that one more time. Let me write that down so I can put it in the show notes.
ColoradoCoachDiary.com.
All right. I'll put that in the show notes. Okay.
And glassbackboards.com.
I would like to have you back on for that book. If you're able, I would love to have you back on to talk about that.
Sure.
So yeah, go ahead.
I think the most important thing why the books are written is that, especially football, but both sports, football has become part of the American culture. Like I said, it's part of like hamburgers, iPhones, race cars, going to work. And instead of Sunday, where people after church would gather around for an hour or two, I see people we go to St. Francis Church, Catholic church by here, which gets done around 11 o'clock. And that's when the NFL starts and people are racing out to their cars to get home to get to kickoffs.
Yeah, I'm a preacher where I am right now, and I try to get on Titans Day. I try to get done so I can go get dinner and then come back home and watch the game. I get that. I get that completely.
Well, I golf at Garden of the Gods. Horses there, and there's a group of guys. The Broncos don't come on until like 2:15, 2:30 generally, and I play early morning basketball that has a church service with it. and then I have a tennis workout, and then I go play 9 or 18 holes. But we have guys in our golf group, which is about 24 to 30 guys. We just pick it up, half guys walk and half guys, use carts. The guys will be on the 15th hole or the 8th hole, and it's 2:00 and they're off in their cart to get home. I go, where are they going? They're going home to watch the Broncos. They got to see the kickoff. I mean, that's a cultural change.
I respect that. That's what. Now, give me real quick because I got a couple more minutes before Zoom kicks us off. Give me one thing that you want to see from your Packers this year. And thank you again. You have been an awesome guest.
I think that the team needs a little bit better passing attack. I think they're weak and wideouts, and they drafted that receiver from Texas. I think he'll play a big part in their attack. And I think that they will be more aggressive regarding Jordan Love, and I hope I see that. Their defense has been okay, not great, but I think they'll be doing a lot there. And I also think their coaching staff will be a little bit more intense. For years, Aaron Rodgers is a fabulous player and everything, but it wasn't just the Packers, but the whole state of Wisconsin had to deal with, I don't know if I want to come back. I don't know if I want to play and all this kind of stuff. And that's just him. I mean, when he played great. But they don't have that anymore. So they've all moved on. So
you had that with a couple of quarterbacks, didn't you?
Oh, Brett Favre?
Yeah. A lot of wishy-washy up there, and that's not good.
Yeah. Well, they have 3 quarterbacks over 30 years. I mean,
that's not bad.
Yeah, and Chicago had like 30 of them. I mean,
yeah, well, one of them was my favorite player of all time, or second favorite player of all time. So I'm just going to keep quiet on that. I grew up as a Cutler fan. I followed him from college on because Vanderbilt just down the road from us. He was a Bronco. He was drafted by the Broncos and then went to the Bears and then went to the Dolphins. And I remember watching the Bears and the Packers play, and I think they played in the NFC Championship that one year where the Packers won. So that's actually pretty makes you kind of sad to think you followed somebody like Cutler that long.
Well, I think the Bears, to be honest with you, I was at the draft. The only thing I was hoping for is that they didn't draft Jeanette, that back from Boise State. I think he's the real deal.
I think so too.
I think he would have put the Bears possibly in the first place in that division.
Like I said, I'm about to kick off that guy, Jeanette. He is a beast. I think he'll be one of those guys that you're like, it was worth drafting him in the first round. Doc, thank you so much for coming on. And like I said, I'd love to have you on later on to talk about your basketball book, if that's all right.
You got it.
All right, thank you. And thank y'all for listening to the Football is Family podcast.
The heel gets the heat. The babyface gets the cheers. But the jobber gets, well, the job done. And speaking of jobbers, Barry Horowitz wasn't there to win titles. He was there to build them. By selling every move, every storyline, and every new star that stepped into the ring. He was the secret sauce. And now, he's the headline in his new book titled Wrestling is My Gimmick, My Life on the Wrong Side of the 3 Count. This memoir is a deep dive into wrestling's most underrated position and the man who made it an art form. Whether you're a fan of wrestling, a fan of sports history, or just love a great story, this book is for you. Again, that's Wrestling is My Gimmick by Barry Horowitz. Grab your copy today before the count strikes 3.